You're really clueless, aren't you? The inheritance, the inheritance. Hurry up and hand it over."
As soon as she entered the front door, my sister-in-law barged in and started talking nonstop, clearly in a good mood. We were never close, so why now? I was bewildered when these words hit me.
"If it weren't for Mike's inheritance, I wouldn't come near this gloomy place."
Indeed, to her, who is dressed head to toe in glitzy clothes and accessories, the house where her brother Mike and his widow, me, live must seem gloomy. However, I fought my sister-in-law, who wouldn't even pay respects to the deceased Mike's altar, and brought up the inheritance while standing at the entrance, was much more insidious. This attitude of hers was not something new. She was arrogant about her looks and often harsh towards my gentle husband. I heard from my husband that she changed her tune dramatically and became ingratiating once he started succeeding and earning a substantial income. I was utterly appalled by her coldness. She barely visited him during his repeated hospital stays due to chronic illness, and didn't shed a single tear at the funeral. I had decided to cut ties with her, but the greedy sister-in-law would not allow that.
"Come on, I don't have all day. Hurry up, you must be busy, right?"
The sister-in-law, with her eyes sparkling childishly, was convinced she would receive the inheritance without a doubt. But I hold something that will distort that expression of hers. It's the last words from my late husband. This will explain everything. I am Sally. Widowed early in my mid-60s, I led a modest life, not growing taller than necessary. About a month ago, I lost my beloved husband. It was due to a worsening of a chronic illness that he had been dealing with for many years. My husband and I met and married when we were both in our 40s, so we didn't have any children. For 20 years, we supported each other, so the sense of loss at that time was significant. I even considered following him in death, wondering if there was any need to continue cooking for someone else since we had no children, but I lacked the courage, embarrassingly. Moreover, my late husband repeatedly told me, "No matter what happens to me, don't get discouraged. You are an independent and wonderful woman." I couldn't ignore the words of my husband, now his last testament. Life changed drastically after my husband passed away. I was with him in the hospital at midnight, and right after, I was arranging the funeral, and everything proceeded smoothly. It was the only time I was saved from being sad or thinking about my husband in a daze. Encouraged by many, including my sister and her husband, who helped with the funeral preparations, I managed to get through that tumultuous month. I barely remember that time, but my sister later told me, "You did a fine job sending Mike off. He must be resting peacefully in heaven." Despite the initial confusion and stress that made me ill for a few days, not everything was bad. More people attended the funeral than I expected. Since my husband had originally worked for a nationally known company and was an executive at its headquarters, I expected that many people I did not know would be there. Indeed, the people from the company who attended the ceremony spoke highly of my husband's good character, and even sent him off with tears in their eyes. There were even attendees who flew in from international branches, sharing how they often went out for drinks when my husband visited their locations. Though I regret not spending more time with each person, I diligently noted everyone's names and addresses to properly express my gratitude later through condolence returns. My sister and her husband helped greatly with these arrangements, so now I can finally catch my breath. I feel immense gratitude, thinking this too was due to my husband's gentle nature. While I want to boast about being blessed with such a wonderful person, I sometimes wonder if that was always the case, particularly because of my sister-in-law. The presence of my husband's sister, my sister-in-law, was the cause of the problem. She's significantly younger than my husband. Compared to women her age, she's youthful in appearance and manner, making her somewhat famous in our neighborhood. She's aware of her beauty and seems to enjoy polishing it daily. Up to this point, there was no issue. She's 58, so not exactly young, and I can't help but think she shouldn't be wearing mini skirts and showing off her legs anymore, but that's not really for me to judge, so I don't worry about it. The problem is that she always finds a way to make snide remarks to me. I'm not as pretty as she is, nor do I have the enthusiasm for yoga or spa visits.
Sally, you always look so dowdy. Aren't you embarrassed to be such a country bumpkin? Mike was wealthy, so why didn't he marry someone more beautiful?
She greets me with such insults and scrutinizes everything I wear as if appraising its value.
What's with using a no-name brand bag at your age? And those shoes. How long have you had them? You were wearing them the last time we met, weren't you? Sloppy people can be spotted by their accessories, even if their clothes are decent. I can tell right away. Doesn't Mike buy you anything? He's not into material things, so if you ask, he'd probably buy them, right?
I have enough bags and shoes, though not as many as my sister-in-law. If she calls me sloppy, so be it, but I've always been someone who doesn't shop much. In fact, I make it a point to throw away something old whenever I buy something new, so my house is rather Spartan. On anniversaries and birthdays, when asked by my husband if I wanted anything, I would without hesitation plan a trip. To me, objects can be bought anytime, but memories are priceless and irreplaceable. Now that my husband is gone, I'm glad I continued making that choice. Every time my sister-in-law made a snide comment, I would hint at this belief, but she would just scoff.
Mike wasn't much to look at either, so in that sense, you were a good match, right? But grabbing such a man to marry must mean you were after his money, weren't you?
No matter the insult, she always concluded with this. This is what troubles me about her. She insists I married my husband for his money and spreads this among relatives. Indeed, there were many women who approached my husband with that intent. He wasn't into gambling or nightlife, his only hobby was fishing, so I vividly remember being surprised by his savings when we got married. But I never had the intention to live lavishly off it. At that time, I too had a 20-year career with my company and had a decent amount of savings, not as much as my husband, but substantial. Our shared value of not overspending was one of the reasons we got married, not because I was after his money as my sister-in-law claimed. I explained this to her and asked her to correct the misunderstanding with relatives, but she never listened to me. She seems to have unilaterally decided that we don't get along and always finds something to criticize. My sister-in-law has always been competitive, and even my husband tried to avoid her when he was alive. Perhaps that's why she hardly helped with the funeral preparations. Although I was the chief mourner, she never once offered condolences when my husband started getting sick or when he was hospitalized. She even got angry when I contacted her about it, saying, "Don't bother me with such things." So I resolved never to tell her anything again, even in my heart. However, to avoid affecting my husband's condition, I pretended in front of him that his sister was concerned, telling him gentle lies. Ultimately, until his death, my sister-in-law never showed herself in front of my husband, and even at the wake, she acted as if she was reluctantly doing us a favor, like it was someone else's problem. Yet, the relatives around her would whisper, "She's been crying every day since she heard her brother was ill, almost losing her appetite and unable to shed tears. That's why she looks so drained. Maybe she didn't visit the hospital because she couldn't bear to see Mike in a weakened state." Hearing this, I was overwhelmed by an indescribable frustration, mixed with the shock of losing my husband, and I teared up right there. My sister-in-law, talked about as if she were a tragic heroine, looked too well nourished to have lost her appetite, with no tear stains or swollen eyes. Despite telling me not to contact her, she acted meekly in front of the relatives. My sister, sensing my feelings, skillfully led me away. Otherwise, I might have lost my composure, yelled at the relatives. Realizing that my sister-in-law is selfish to the core, showing no respect even for the deceased, I resolved to limit any future interactions with her. I slowly sorted through my husband's belongings, balancing it with work and household tasks, while also healing emotionally. At first, every item of his that disappeared felt like erasing a memory, but I reminded myself that the memories with my husband were etched in my heart. While cherishing the time with those who occasionally visited the altar, I tried to regain my peaceful life. But, as expected, it was my sister-in-law who shattered this tranquility. She rang the doorbell and rattled the sliding door.
"Sally, you're there, right? Your sister-in-law has come all this way, so open up."
I never thought of her as my sister, but she yelled as if to make sure the neighbors heard. I was hanging laundry and couldn't pretend not to be home.
"What were you doing? You made me wait so long. I almost got sunburned."
As soon as I opened the door, before I could speak, she barged in, thrusting a fancy foreign-brand shopping bag into my hands and starting to take off her shoes. "What's this all of a sudden?" I managed to ask, to which she dramatically sighed.
"Look, I've been so busy and couldn't visit, right? I thought you might be feeling down, so I brought something nice."
She snatched back the shopping bag she had handed me and began pulling out items while standing there. Jewelry, perfume, and fancy baked goods, none of which seemed appropriate for me. Did she really think I would be genuinely happy to receive these? Besides, my sister-in-law acted obnoxiously nice to me today.
I know I've been harsh to you, Sally, but you were the wife chosen by my only brother. I didn't want his wealth to fall into the hands of a gold digger. But seeing you at the funeral, I realized you were different. Only someone who truly loved Mike could shed so many tears and give a speech with disheveled hair, disregarding what others might think.
She's not used to praising people, it seems. Even when trying to appease me, she comments on my appearance and actions. However, the way she looked at me seemed almost respectful, as if meeting someone she admired, infused with a certain passion. Despite my confusion over her abruptly changed demeanor, she continued to shower me with compliments. Feeling increasingly suffocated by the presence of someone whose true thoughts were inscrutable, I gently said, "I'm sorry, but I haven't settled the estate yet. The house isn't in a state for visitors, so perhaps you could just pay your respects to Mike." Then, with her usual cold gaze, she looked at me and shouted, "You really are oblivious. Do you think I came here just to see your gloomy faces?"
It's about the inheritance. Isn't that obvious? You shouldn't have to make me say it.
Excuse me. Confused by my sister-in-law's demanding gesture, palms up as if waiting to receive something, I was at a loss.
How long do you think I've waited? I have a pretty good idea of how much Mike earned, so I know roughly how much I should get from the inheritance. Even if you try to hoard it, Sally, it's futile. Hand it over now. If you think of deceiving, I'll call the lawyers and the police.
The division of property is being handled by the lawyers, so there's no deceiving here.
Don't play dumb. I'm entitled to half of the inheritance. It's supposed to be split between you and me, right?
I tilted my head at my sister-in-law, who was screaming with her face beet red. I had heard from the lawyer that siblings of the deceased are entitled to a quarter of the estate, which is divided further if there are more siblings. Since my husband and his sister were the only siblings, she would normally receive a quarter of the money. However, my husband often spoke about this issue before he died, pondering what to do. No wonder, as his sister had mocked his looks since childhood, and along with their parents, who favored the beautiful sister, seemed to have bullied him. To prove them wrong, my husband studied hard, earned scholarships, worked part-time, attended a top-tier university, and secured a job at a major company, eventually becoming very successful. That was about all he shared about himself, indicating he must have had a tough life before. Indeed, anyone would be troubled by the thought of the estate passing to such a sister. I, having been consulted about this, urged that the final decision was his to make. I only learned of my husband's decision after he passed away. Unaware of all this, my sister-in-law changed her tone drastically.
So you, just a wife, are going to take most of the inheritance. You're a money grubber too. I always thought it was suspicious, you marrying that plain man after turning 40. The only reason to spend a life with someone who has nothing but money is clear. Listening quietly, what about love? What about values? It's all just talk in the end. Give me half of my share right now, and I'll disappear, so hurry up.
Her sweet words and gifts seemed aimed at wresting my inherited wealth. Given her constant antagonism, I had suspected some ulterior motive. Her loudly screaming at the entrance of the house, where my husband's altar stood, confirmed her extreme lack of morals. I wondered what my husband, listening quietly from heaven, would think, and told my sister-in-law to wait while I fetched a certain document. Her eyes lit up upon hearing this, saying things like, "You really are understanding, Sally, and let's go have some fancy French food with that money." I didn't respond to her pace, and brought the document from the back of the room to give to her. "Here, from Mike, this is for you." What I handed her was my husband's last letter, his will. Upon realizing this, she quickly unfolded the tri-folded paper and scanned through it. Her perfectly symmetrical eyebrows moved up and down, clearly showing her disturbance at the letter's content.
"What does this mean? I didn't know anything about this."
Her ignorance was her own fault for never trying to see her brother. I almost spoke out, but she slumped down weakly, likely not to grasp my words. The will stated that my husband shall inherit all his property to me. As a final act of gratitude to his wife, who had supported him in every way, leading a peaceful and fulfilling life together, he dedicated everything he had to me, leaving behind a letter so passionately worded it was almost embarrassing to read aloud. Reading this, I felt a warm surge of emotion, realizing that even in illness, my husband had thought of me, even though the main goal was to leave not a penny to his sister. In the end, there was absolutely no money left for the sister-in-law. The answer was clear, but my sister-in-law, staring into space, muttered, "What does this mean?" With her face pale, she was unresponsive to anything I said, so I almost had to force her out of the door and quickly locked it behind her. Through the door's window glass, I could faintly see her shadow swaying from side to side, dragging her body away. I thought she wouldn't bother me after reading the will, but to my dismay, she called me the next afternoon.
"I never thought you were such a vile person, Sally. You deceived me so well."
Even over the phone, I could feel the intensity of her fury, giving me chills. But I hadn't done anything wrong, and I didn't deserve to be called wicked by her. I was about to respond, but she cut me off.
"You think you've got the upper hand by pushing me down? Well, too bad, because you're about to see your face twist in agony. This is your punishment for angering me. I won't forgive you even if you beg."
I vaguely understood she was talking about the inheritance, but I had no idea what she meant by me feeling pain or begging. Silenced by confusion, she mistook my silence for fear and began to laugh loudly.
"See, it's too late for apologies. I'd love to see you now, but I'm busy. I've just secured an appointment with my lawyer."
She boasted as if victorious, but I couldn't understand why she needed to see a lawyer or why she was telling me this. Instead of bothering me, she should just stick to her usual activities like yoga or spa treatments, I thought absent-mindedly. Then she yelled, "Don't you get the situation? Talking to you just frustrates me, which is bad for my beauty."
"I'm not satisfied with the estate division, so I'm preparing to file a complaint. I don't know if you and Mike schemed alone, but a wife taking all the inheritance is unheard of. It's against the law." You can't just show Mike's will and expect me to shut up. You don't have a shred of conscience to use your sick husband just for your own gain. I have a right to my inheritance, and I'm going to claim it."
Apparently, she believed I was plotting to monopolize the inheritance. Thinking I had influenced Mike to write the will, I couldn't stay silent. "It's a waste of time for you." Mike personally handed that will to the lawyer. I only read it afterward, and I couldn't have tampered with it. Also, the lawyer said, "You have no claim to the inheritance, so I think it's best you don't bother, as they won't take your case seriously." Her voice grew louder, possibly infuriated by my calm response.
"What's with that tone? You won't be so composed for long. Just keep sitting pretty. I'm serious. I've called several times since yesterday and finally got an appointment. The lawyer must recognize my determination. They're on my side and can even get me compensation from you."
With a villain-like line, "Remember this," she hung up the phone. I couldn't fathom why she called, as she wouldn't have listened to anything I said. Perhaps she thought the mention of a lawyer would unsettle me. Far from reflecting on not receiving a penny from her brother, she was determined to take it by any means, which was almost refreshing. Months passed without incident, and I managed to tidy up my husband's cluttered study. Gradually packing up, I left our home filled with memories of my husband. He had always wanted to retire to a quiet house in the suburbs, so I decided to fulfill that wish. I sold the house and land we lived in, and used the proceeds as a down payment to move to the area where my sister and her husband live. It's regrettable we couldn't do it while my husband was alive, but our dog Maya, who lived with us for over 10 years, was delighted with the new home. She frolicked on the smooth flooring, so I bought a light-colored carpet to prevent strain on her legs from slipping. Letting go of our old home meant fewer possessions, but it also meant I could gradually create a more comfortable living space, which gave me something to look forward to. Yet, the eerie feeling of my husband not being there lingered, making the sparse furniture seem even lonelier. Especially when Maya was asleep, I found myself lost in thought, though I knew it wasn't good for me. One day, my phone rang as if to interrupt my hazy feelings. I jumped up and picked up the phone without checking who was on the other end of the line.
"You're going to kick me to the bone, you pestilence."
It was my sister-in-law. Her sudden yelling woke me up completely, but I still had no idea what she was on about. Sensing my silence, she continued without waiting for a response.
"It's your fault I'm getting divorced, because the inheritance didn't come through."
What? My absurd response was just a guess at her meaning. She probably told her husband they would get my husband's inheritance, and their relationship soured when it vanished. But to reach divorce over not getting an inheritance speaks volumes about the fragility of their marriage. It's not fair to dump their issues on me.
Why don't you apologize instead of staying silent? Your fault we can't make ends meet. What am I supposed to do all by myself?
You could get a job, you're still young in your 50s. She fell silent after my calm reply. Maybe she was irritated by the words "just work," or maybe she was caught up in the term in her 50s. Whatever the case, my sister-in-law needs to get her feet on the ground and accept reality. If you lived on your husband's salary, you shouldn't need the inheritance. Why the divorce?
He was after Mike's wealth from the start. He said, "If we're not getting your brother's inheritance, you're useless to me. You're just a woman with good looks and money, decades spent together, all for nothing. I want my time back." It was an intense argument. Why should I be the one getting yelled at? He's the pitiful one, earning so little. I want my time back.
I only met my sister-in-law's husband when they got engaged, and then at holiday family gatherings. Like her, he favored flashy brands and luxury cars, giving off a frivolous impression. Her comment about his low salary suggests they probably both relied on approaching others for money. They surely had no savings and must have been living off my brother-in-law's income. Given the luxury items both my sister-in-law and her husband flaunted, they had no right to complain, having indulged themselves with his money. He married her out of selfishness and a penchant for extravagance, so it was all his own doing.
I even got turned away by the lawyer I consulted, who confirmed there was no inheritance for me. Everyone's against me, but you're the one I can't forgive. If you hadn't been around, none of this would have happened.
My sister-in-law apparently went to her lawyer, even though I had called to stop her. As I said, it was a wasted opportunity and a red herring.
Sally, you must have brainwashed my husband, right? He said he should have married someone like you. Why does your name come up in his words? You must have been seducing him behind my back.
How does that even make sense? I don't even have your husband's contact information.
Lies. My husband has never praised a plain woman like you before. You must have seduced him and had an affair. Confess, and I might forgive you if you give me the inheritance.
How? This conversation is pointless. Overwhelmed by her absurd accusations, I ended the call. The house was already being demolished, and the land was sold, so her showing up would be futile. I hadn't shared my new address, so our chances of meeting were nearly non-existent. I immediately set up a call block, deciding to live peacefully from now on. About 6 months passed, and I adapted to life with my dog, Maya. I dined out once or twice a month with my sister and her husband, enjoying my days. Sometimes we ate in the room with my husband's altar, which he probably appreciated. Thanks to regular health checks, my recent medical exam showed no issues, and local shops provided convenience, leaving me with little worry. The only concern was a call from the social services a few months back. Divorced and broke, my sister-in-law had applied for welfare. However, officials stated she couldn't receive it if she had family to assist, but relatives who once flattered her unanimously refused to help. Her lavish past was well known, leading to her isolation from family. Social services then contacted me, but given her past actions and motives, I felt no obligation to help. I don't care if she was on good terms with my husband before he died, but since she and her ex-husband joined forces and slipped up together, only looking for money, and did not even behave properly at the funeral, I have no right to do anything about it now. I hope that she will reflect on her actions and live her life, since she herself became addicted to money, even though she had always said that I was just after money. I don't know what happened after that. According to rumors, my sister-in-law got into trouble at the job she finally found and resigned in a flash. The neighbors of the house where my sister-in-law was living found out that her ex-husband was no longer around and moved out. When they found out about the mature divorce, which could be taken as a lie or a truth, no one around me knew how my sister-in-law was living or where she was, and I gradually forgot about her because I myself was not interested. Having regained peace of mind, I spent more time with Maya than ever before. Maya, who had always been quiet like my husband, stopped barking as she got older, and I was worried about her. My sister, who had always been a dog lover, must have grown attached to Maya as she often took care of her, because one day she suddenly contacted me to tell me that she had gotten a puppy. I excitedly went to my sister and her husband's house, and was greeted by him. Immediately, Maya's eyes lit up as she walked up to the puppy and looked at it with delight as it bounced around. I watched the scene with a smile on my face, hoping he would become a good friend to Maya.